Honourable Member for Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is a mouthful. It's always an honour to rise in this House and speak, and today on Bill C-32, an act to implement certain provisions of the Fall Economic Statement and Fiscal Update. So, Madam Speaker, when I spoke on this government's last Fall Economic Statement and Fiscal Update in February, I shared how frustrated the people of Flamborough-Glanbrook were feeling about the cost of living crisis and the housing crisis. And Madam Speaker, I'm sad to report that over the course of the past year, and certainly hearing the Fall Economic Statement that was delivered earlier, their frustration has only gotten worse. Canadians wanted hope, and instead they got increased heating and grocery bills. They wanted a plan for the economy, for the recovery, and instead the PBO and other organizations have predicted private sector growth will be sluggish or even worse. And Canadians wanted to hear an update that would give them confidence in these uncertain economic times, and instead what the government delivered was an update that failed to address the out-of-control cost of living crisis, because it actually adds fuel to the inflationary fire. With more government spending, more taxes, Madam Speaker, Canadians have never felt more pessimistic about their financial future. And so when I spoke last winter, the inflation rate was only the worst it had been in 20 years. And by the spring, it was only the worst it had been in 30 years, but now it's the worst it has been in 40 years. And so, Madam Speaker, how much more can this government expect Canadians to suffer? I spoke recently to Mary, a senior in Waterdown, in a community in my constituency, and she expressed how gravely concerned she was with the rising cost of her rent, her utilities, her groceries, and how they have risen so quickly that she can barely able to manage the basics anymore. And her exact words were, "I just managed to survive, and I never thought my retirement years would be so sad." So, Madam Speaker, these words, that my retirement years would be so sad, break my heart, and they should break the heart of all members of this place. Seniors like Mary have worked hard their entire lives, and they deserve that their retirement years should be years to enjoy, and the reckless policies of this government are robbing them of that. Madam Speaker, it's not just seniors that are feeling the pinch, it's also young families. And so I spoke to Will, who's a father of a young family in my constituency at one of the fall fairs of my riding a couple months ago, and his mortgage renewal is coming up in a few months. And so he's very concerned because not only has he seen his grocery bill double, he's seen the cost of fuel to get to work increase dramatically. He's now seeing his heating bills increase as winter and the cold weather start to set in, but he's got in the back of his mind the fact that his mortgage is coming up for renewal, and we know the higher interest rates that are happening because of the inflationary spending of this government. So out-of-control government spending, which has created more dollars chasing fewer goods, causing higher inflation, is leading to more interest rates, and we know that tomorrow the Bank of Canada is going to announce the latest in a series of rate increases, the seventh, I believe, which is further going to increase the cost on families like Will's, and it's really the cruelest tax of all. So in growing suburban Ontario communities like mine, people like Will are putting on a brave face and they're trying to plow through, but they are dealing with these inflationary pressures on food, home heating, and now looking down the road at their mortgage rates as well. We ran a survey of the people in Flamborough-Glanbrook this past fall to ask them, how the cost of living was impacting them, and we knew the answer already from all of these anecdotes. But over 900 people responded, and the results really told the story. 94% surveyed felt they were feeling the financial pinch, and more than half of those were going to change their habits or hold off spending plans as a result. And the pinch, of course, is not limited to people in my riding. 6 in 10 Canadians across the country have said that they're feeling the impact of the inflation in their daily lives. In fact, there's a study out of Dalhousie University that reported that a quarter of Canadians are cutting back on essentials like food, housing, and utilities. And we know that when people go to the grocery stores these days, they're cringing at what they see as the price of some basic items. You know, meat is up 7.6%, dairy up 10%, bakery products 15%, vegetables 12%. And those were the figures from a couple months ago. We know they're probably higher today. And food banks, as has been noted, are seeing record number of visits. 1.5 million Canadians visiting food banks. That's a dramatic increase. That's an all-time high, and that's a shame. So how much more does this Prime Minister expect Canadians to take? People like Mary and Will can't afford mortgages and rent, while our Prime Minister is spending $6,000 a night in hotel rooms in London. So, is there a more blatant example of how out of touch the Prime Minister is? And Madam Speaker, how much more can this government expect Canadians to take before they're going to break? They're looking for hope. They're looking for strong, competent leadership. And through this bill, Mr. Speaker, I think there's a host of problems and inconsistencies. And first of all, I don't see actions lining up with words. So the government talked about the fact that farmers grow the food that feeds the world, Canadian farmers. And we know we have an abundant food supply here, but we've seen this government attack farmers, slap fertilizer tariffs on them, the carbon tax on the heating and cooling of barns, the drying of grain, the growing of those crops that feed Canada and the world are breaking their operations. Also in the statement they said, we have the natural resources to support our allies with energy security, which sounds great, but this government, the Liberals, have been ensuring we can't get these resources out of the ground. And just last week we saw Germany finally give up on us and sign an agreement to import LNG from Qatar instead. And perhaps the biggest inconsistency of all is the fact that, the economic update was intended or was purported to help make life more affordable for Canadians. But how can we make life more affordable for Canadians when we're tripling the carbon tax and increasing other taxes as we head into winter? And we know that we had a Conservative motion to exempt home heating fuel from some of those taxes and bring a bit of relief. And that's important to people in my constituency who heat with propane or home heating oil because there's not the natural gas infrastructure in certain parts of the riding, and they don't have those options. But yet the Liberals and NDP coalition voted together to defeat that motion. So I can conclude from anything in Bill C-32, Madam Speaker, it might be that the Liberals are kind of true to their form. We'll tax and spend, and that'll get us out of a cost of living crisis. And so we saw $30 billion more in spending, perhaps a grab bag of credits to give the appearance of supporting Canadians. And while we certainly support relief on the GST, the HST, and on home heating, we saw a whole bunch of other money spent. And what's happening is that the Liberals are taking more money out of one pocket and giving a little bit back and pretending that that's actually going to help people. But what's happening is they're profiting from inflation. They're increasing taxes on things like home heating, food, and of course the resulting interest rate increases. One of their solutions, of course, was to cut your Disney Plus subscription. I think that Canadians want a better answer than that. We know that the interest on the national debt that's been racked up by this government is going to exceed in the coming years the amount of money that's spent on the Canada Health Transfer. And so, we've got $27 billion this year on interest payments, and that's money that should be and could be spent actually helping farmers or families or seniors rather than gobbling up their bank accounts to pay for more government spending through taxes. That is why a Conservative government would commit to any new spending being matched by a dollar for dollar equivalent in savings, just as households manage their own budgets, rather than just racking up the credit card endlessly, because at the end of the day, they're paying for that, plus the interest rates increases they're going to see as a result of the inflationary spending. So Conservatives would, instead of creating more cash, would create more of what cash buys. So homes, more gas, more food, and we certainly have all the resources in Canada to do that. We'll make energy more affordable by repealing some of the anti-energy laws and getting Canadian energy out to markets so that we can generate jobs and economic activity here, because a tax plan is not an environment plan, it is actually a tax plan. And so we have an opportunity to change that.